Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Fave Yogis. Do you teach privately? Make payment and registration a breeze. Use the Fave Yogis app to create and manage classes for your personal clients. Life is just easier with autopay. You can forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're up in Canada, sending an invoice, an e-transfer, or a PayPal, depending on where your clients are in the world. With Fave Yogis, you can use autopay to enable repeating payments. This will save you so much time and make things so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync. Google Calendar integration automatically updates teacher and student classes when you make changes. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to the App Store and find Fave Yogis, Favyogis. Use code MBOM and let them know that I sent you. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Offering Tree. Most wellness professionals struggle with creating a website and a digital presence. So Offering Tree created easy-to-use software that guides yoga teachers through the process in about 30 minutes. That's right. You can have a beautiful mobile responsive website in 30 minutes. Offering Tree's website tools allow teachers to put their class schedule on their own branded website and allows their students to book classes and even pay online. It also supports one-on-one appointment booking. Your Offering Tree website will have a whole host of other tools to help you be a successful teacher, like newsletter and a blog, website traffic analytics, search engine optimization, client communication tools, and more. Offering Tree really does make it simple to have a website and takes care of the tech side of teaching. So if you've been putting off creating a website because you think it will be a headache, you should really give them a try. To get started on your website today, go to offeringtree.com/MBOM, MBOM, and receive 50% off your first 3 months. When I created a site with Offering Tree, I was pleasantly surprised at really how easy it was. I had a website that really looked professional in less than 30 minutes. Again, check out offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive 50% off your first 3 months and create your new website today. Finally, I am very, very excited to be launching a brand new partnership today, and that partnership is with PunchPass. And PunchPass is a booking software that lets you effortlessly manage your customers, the passes they purchase, and the classes they attend. It's the simplest, most flexible tool you'll find on the market now, and you really get exactly what you need without the headache. They offer 3 payment plans, so you don't have to pay for features you don't use. And on top of that, they have top-notch customer service. So go ahead and give their free trial a go and see for yourself what PunchPass is like. Head on over to punchpass.com/MBOM to start your free trial today. And best part is that you don't even have to enter your credit card. All right, now on to today's episode of the podcast. I am very excited to be joined by Stacy Dockins today. Stacy is a senior yoga teacher. She's been teaching and practicing for over 25 years of her life. She's done a ton of dedication towards the human body, teaching yoga. And on this episode, we talk about a ton of different stuff. Stacy is not only a yoga teacher, but she's also the founder of Yoga Project Studios based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we talk about studio ownership. We talk about creating programs and retreats that are successful, how to make those stand out, and all of that good stuff. And then we also talk about her recent book that she just published, which is called Embodied Posture, which is really about aligning yoga postures to suit one's uniqueness. So the idea that we aren't really all built the exact same, and that as yoga teachers, we really need to learn to watch bodies and see how the postures can fit into a student's body, which I really love. So we talk about that. We talk about the process of writing a book, what that was like. And of course, we touch on tons of business lessons that Stacy's learned throughout her career. So I hope that you guys enjoy this episode of the podcast. And without further ado, here is Stacy. Stacy, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to be chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I am super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for everything we're going to talk about today, but let's back up a little bit. Can you tell me your yoga story and how you first got into yoga?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let me back up a little from when I actually started, just to make it a little more relevant. So I was one of those awkward young girls who just wasn't ever very physical, and I didn't ever learn to do cartwheels. I didn't play sports, any of those things. So that was my childhood. But somewhere I had a longing and a knowing deep inside of me that I wanted to be physical, and I kind of wanted to play sports, but I never really had the courage to do it. So fast forward that a couple of decades, I got married pretty young. My current husband now, we have 3 children, and I got married rather young and had children really close together. So I was a young mom with 3 babies under the age of 3.5. And so just living that, nursing or pregnant life for many years. And during that time I was raising little ones, I was witnessing my husband. He was getting up early in the morning and going to the gym and in really great shape. And I was getting really resentful because I was at home with 3 babies and hadn't found that for myself yet. So that led to me getting my courage up to pack the kids up, go to the gym. And it was one of these scenes where I dropped my kids off at the gym nursery for the first time, and they're all 3 crying. And I'm going to the treadmill, and I'm like walking and crying, and I don't even really know what to do at the gym. That's how bad it was. And so, but that was a really cathartic moment for me. It was a moment where I finally just got my courage up to be physical in my body. And it was later in my life. So I was in my mid-20s by that time, but that led to other things. So being at the gym for a while, I eventually discovered indoor cycling spin classes. And I loved them. And it was something that I felt really strong at, was doing a lot of that. That eventually led to me doing outdoor cycling. So I was doing outdoor road cycling and loved that, felt really strong at it. Eventually, from a lot of cycling, my back was bothering me. And so I was dabbling in yoga here and there. And so set that scenario aside. Another thing that was happening parallel to that is that I guess like a lot of other people, I had this fear of speaking in front of groups. But I had a really strong fear of speaking in front of groups. And my speech comm class in college was like, I can still remember how it felt, like just preparing for that class. And I was witnessing my oldest son, who at the time was really young. He had this little project in preschool to present something in front of his class. And the night before that came, he was just so upset that he had to do it. And all of a sudden I saw in him what I had felt to myself, this fear of talking in front of groups. And I thought, wow, like how do I support my son through this? I'm going to help him, get over his fear. And then I thought, wait a second, like the only way I can help him is to face my own fears and get over it myself. So at that time, kind of around the same time, I had this opportunity to start teaching. People had asked me if I wanted to teach indoor cycling. So it scared me to do it, but I thought, okay, here's an opportunity for me to face my own fears. And I really just started teaching fitness because I wanted to get over that fear of being able to speak in front of groups. So that was what led me into teaching fitness. And as I was teaching, I was getting into teaching spinning, facing my fear, getting nervous every single time I taught, but still loved it. One day I was teaching spinning, and the gym owner came over and said, hey, the yoga teacher didn't show up. Can you teach yoga? I'm like, okay, I know a little yoga. And I was like, okay, sure. And so I jumped off my bike in my cycling shorts and my spin shoes and ran over to the yoga room. And it was a packed room. And I walked in and I just said, hello. And I just taught what I knew. And, I hadn't even done any trainings at that point. But that was that was the very tip of how I started teaching. And I just loved it. And so that was how I started. But at the same time, I was just getting into my own practice. And so I didn't keep teaching from there, obviously, because I didn't have any type of certification. But that really started my interest even more into the practice. And I found ways to help my body feel better through practicing. My back was feeling better. And I found that it was a really great complement to what I was already doing with cycling.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And So from there, did you decide to get a training? Was that your next step?
I did, yeah. So after a while, I did like lots of little weekend training. So you have to keep in mind, I'm in an environment where I'm not going to a studio. There's really not any studios around at this point in time where I live. And so I'm not in this community of like knowing yoga teachers and knowing about trainings and things like that. I was kind of on an island, by myself as far as yoga went, except for these, gym classes that were happening. And so I just started doing little weekend certifications. So I did some Yoga Fit weekend stuff. Are you familiar with Yoga Fit?
No, I'm not.
It's kind of they've been around for a long time. They're a big, big chain. They do a lot of training. I don't even know if they're in Canada. I think they are. But anyway, I did some of their weekend trainings. And then I did just some other yoga trainings that were more in the fitness world. They weren't in, any of the big types of yoga teacher trainings we have today. And so I got these little certifications, and I had a little red notebook of my sequences and my notes, and I put my name on every sub list that I could find because I loved it so much, and I wanted to teach. So on Friday evening, if someone called and said, "Hey, we need a sub," and it was an hour away, I would tell my husband, "I got to go." And I would run and teach. So yeah, that was how it started for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And then can you tell me how your career kind of evolved? Like that's obviously quite different from what you're doing now. So can you take me through like, baby teacher Stacy, kind of get me to where you are today?
Yeah. So that was the beginning, me getting on as many sub lists as I can and just trying to get experience teaching everywhere and anywhere that I could. And then eventually, again, I'm still, I'm dabbling in these different gyms where there's a little bit of yoga going on, but I'm still not in an environment where there's a lot of experienced yoga teachers and trainings that I'm being, introduced to. So from that point, I had purchased the book Journey into Power by Baron Baptiste, and I had that book and enjoyed it. And then I found out that Baron was coming to the Dallas-Fort Worth area for a weekend training. And so I signed up for that. And I had never done anything remotely close to that ever. And so I signed up for that, went to it, and it was massive. I'm sure you're familiar with Baron Baptiste. Mm-hmm. And just a big, massive class. And the things that I loved about it were there were a lot of amazing people there, and I felt this sense of community and connection. I didn't really know much else about Baptiste yoga or even Baron at all, but I felt this big sense of community that I really fell in love with. And so from there, after that weekend, I really got the bug to want to pursue training farther and to become a 200-hour certified teacher. So from there, I did follow the Baptiste path initially. And so I did trainings with Baptiste, and then I even eventually, after a while, I worked for Baptiste Power Yoga for a while. I was their program coordinator. And so I helped find venues for trainings and helped with the staff and things like that. And so I did that for a while. Sometime in that time frame, I had been teaching at gyms and loved it. And I just came to a point to where I wanted to have my own space to teach in. It was really not connected to desiring the business of yoga at all. I was very naive and didn't know anything about business at that point. I just had the passion to teach, and at that point to have my own space. So that led me into starting our first studio in 2005. And I started my first studio. It was basically just me teaching. I had a little black box with index cards in it. There was no MBO or I didn't have access to any of that at that time, a very small, beautiful little small space. And so little by little, the business started to grow, and I still didn't know a lot about business. I mean, I'm really one of those stories that I had to make a lot of mistakes and learn along the way. But at that point in time, I had kind of nudged my husband, who was starting to be interested in yoga, to get a teacher certification as well. His story is very different. He says that I signed him up and he didn't know, but I don't remember the story until like that.
I love that.
We have very different stories, but I was like, honey, I'm going to need a sub someday. Like I need someone else teaching. And so he was at the beginning of expanding our teaching staff. And then little by little, we got more teachers. And then from there, we opened, it was a few years later, we opened our second studio. And then we opened another one. And right now we have 3 studios. But my teaching, I worked for Baptiste for a while and learned a lot, met a lot of amazing people. And then I finally got to a point where I felt like I really needed space to expand all of these different ideas and things that I was excited about learning more about in my own teaching. So I kind of branched off and just studied with some other teachers and did other things from there. But yeah, so
I love that. That's amazing. I love that you just dove in. And I'm curious, you said that like you kind of learned things the hard way because you didn't have that business background. What were some of like the biggest things that you learned from opening that first studio or opening your first couple studios?
Wow. I mean, I could go to the very basic elements of like, just the nuts and bolts of the business and, collecting fees from people and things like that. One of the biggest things in the beginning, I think, because it was yoga, I felt like, I don't know, there's this weird idea about it's yoga, it's service, but it's a business and I have a rent to pay and I have teachers to pay and I have an electricity bill to pay. And so I think, and plus we were operating out of a little black box at the time. And if people would come in and say, want classes for free, or I had a really hard time standing up for the value of my business and what I was offering at that time. And it was in a weird way. I'm sure you have stories about that and experiences with that. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? Like this whole idea of yoga. Yeah. But so that was one of the big things I had to learn pretty quickly, is that if I was going to operate a business, that it needed to be operated as a business, no matter what I was offering. Yoga just happened to be the product at that point in time. So just learning my own value and to have more respect for what I was selling and, being okay with charging a particular amount and holding people to that. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned. I think another, and then from there, one of the other biggest lessons I learned is just, it was all new to me. The business part was new. I really just loved yoga and just learning how to work with others, work with people as the staff grew and as we got more teachers, learning how to get over my own fears and insecurities so that I could be more of a mentor and a leader and, a team player as the team grew. And that was a huge journey for me to go through as well.
Yeah. That's definitely like a lot of stuff to learn. And I've been not a studio owner, but a studio manager for 4.5 years now. And there's like so much little stuff that you don't think about. Like you think about like the programming side of things or, like all the fun workshops you get to plan. And it's like, okay, that's one aspect of it, but there's so much back end stuff that comes with running, any business, but specifically with running a studio that I think a lot of people don't realize till they're fully in it.
Absolutely. And I definitely had to follow the path of, of course, in the beginning, I just had to do a lot of that stuff. And then eventually, as my husband joined, he eventually shifted to where he does this full time as well. Now he does this with me, but that was a process. And so I had to go through doing it all, doing too much, kind of getting pulled away from the things that I was really passionate about, the curriculum and the teaching and the content and all of those things, to come full circle back to now we have support. And so that's another thing, is learning how to take a risk and hiring people and allowing other people to work with you and do that, for them to bring their expertise in and to do things for you. And so now I'm in a really good place where we have a staff of people working for us. I'm not answering the phone. I'm not answering emails and things like that. I'm not the front line for our 30 teachers that we have on staff, so that I can keep doing the things that I really love, which is, more of the content and the creative side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one for sure. And I think that it's hard to let somebody else help you with something that you've created. At least for me, it is. It's like, this is my like baby. Like, you need to be really, really, really careful with it type thing. So.
And wow, what a journey it is to learn how to do that. For me, it has been, really evaluating my expectations for my staff and, keeping myself in check when I'm thinking, well, that's not how I would do it. And, really learning how to work with someone so that you can hone their skills and really embrace their uniqueness and what they can bring to the table. And so that has been such a journey for me, but learning every day still.
Absolutely. And so you guys have 3 studios now, you said?
We do, yes.
That's amazing. And are they all under the business of Embodied Posture, or are they kind of something different?
So our studios are under the name Yoga Project. So we're Yoga Project Studios. That's our studio name, and that's been our name since 2005. And Embodied Posture is just the name of my book.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so can you tell me a little bit more about your book? Like, where did that idea come from? What was it like to actually write it?
Yeah. So we started actually training teachers a few years after we opened the studio, really due to a need. So again, I was in a community where there weren't a lot of yoga teachers, and we had a need. We had a growing clientele base, and we needed more teachers, and we had a lot of students that were interested in learning to teach. So we started training teachers pretty early. And throughout our years of training teachers, so that was between 2007, 2008, the book really is something that's kind of been on the back burner of my mind for a long time, simply because I wanted a resource to hand to the teachers that I was training that could be applicable and helpful for them right away in their teaching. And what I was finding is that there were a lot of great anatomy books out there pertaining to yoga, and lots of different ideas out there. Some were more skeletally based, some were more muscular based, and then different perspectives. But I really wanted a resource that helped teachers to have a strong foundational understanding of anatomy and biomechanics, because even today there's so many fantastic teachers and books out there, but it's hard for teachers to understand those advanced concepts, even if it's functional movement, functional yoga, when they don't really understand the nuts and bolts. It's sort of like if you were to, want to start to study medicine, you couldn't jump into studying advanced surgical techniques if you didn't have a really strong foundational anatomical basis. So that was the impetus for the book, is just to have a really practical resource that I could hand to my teachers. I had done some study with Paul Grilly. I was really familiar with a lot of Bernie Clark's work at the time, Sarah Powers. And so I really embrace the idea of bio-individuality, and that our bodies are unique and different, and that I knew that we had to move away from this idea of here's the alignment for the pose, memorize it, give the cues as you stand and teach. We had to train teachers to be critical thinkers. And so that's a little about how the book started, and it's something that's just been there in my head for several years now. And then finally, I was at a teacher training. I was leading a training program in Thailand, and one of my students, I didn't know until she told me, but she is an editor, and she started to see my passion. She was taking a program from me, and she had kind of heard I'd thought about writing a book, and she nudged me and said, "Hey, I'm an editor. I love the work you're doing, and I could work alongside you in this project. Let me know when you want to do it, when you want to make it happen." So that was when it happened. I was in Thailand and got my journal out and made my declaration, I'm going to write my book. And then I just started writing. And wow, what a wild ride that was, just writing the book.
Yeah. I love that. I heard a lot of people who are like, oh, like a goal of mine is to write a book, but I feel like for most people, they don't ever get it done. Were there points where you went without writing for a while, or it was like, no, I'm writing every day, or what was the actual the creative process like?
So one of the things that has stuck with me so strongly, and my editor actually told me this really early on, she said, "Do you know the difference between how'd she say it? do you know the difference between those that actually, the authors, and those that want to write a book, that have a dream to write a book? And she said, writers write. Writers write. She said, writers just write. And so people who don't make the dream happen, I think, or come to bring the book to fruition, gosh, I will say probably every single day over course of a year and a half, I had to talk myself through that self-doubt and the negativity and the like, oh, are you sure you want to write this book? There's a million anatomy books out there. You don't need to do this. Who's going to read it? All of the things that came up. And so it was such a as much as it was a process of, bringing this book to fruition, it was a self-transformation journey all along the way. So I had to, I would tell myself, sit yourself down in the chair and write. This is what we're doing today. But there were many days when I questioned if I should be doing it. There were so many things that happened with the process, with the designing of the book, the printing of the book, along the way that made me question, should I be doing this? But I just kept going. And completing the book, again, as much as it was fantastic to have this final product in my hand, it was like, wow, I actually committed to it and I finished it.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I think it's kind of always been like a background goal for me to write a book if I had like a good idea, which hasn't fully come to me yet, but it's just thinking about writers write. I feel like that's the thing is like, teachers teach, writers write. It's like to do the thing that you want to do, you have to actually sit down and do it, which is so much harder than it actually sounds.
It is, especially when you start realizing, and I was listening to different podcasts and hearing people talk about, it's just not worth it these days to write a book. And so and that may be true, in some aspect. If you're just looking at, I'm writing this book, I'm going to get so much money, for so many copies of the book, you cannot approach it like that. And because you have to think of all of the other strings, as far as yourself and your community and those that you're helping, how it can help in that way. Because a lot of people will say these days it's just not worth it to write a book, but I say it is, just from the personal journey standpoint.
Amazing. And what was it like when you actually, so you have it, you're holding it in your hands and then it goes out to the world? Like, what was that like?
Really vulnerable, really, really scary. And I think that half or probably 3/4 of the way through the book, I started looking at it and thinking, this is like spilling the contents of my OCD brain out to the world, and like, oh my God, people are going to know what's inside my head. And, you can't write a book and assume that there's not going to be mistakes. I think every book I've ever held in my hand, and especially now that I've written one, it's like, you can see the little mistakes. And, I had to finally just surrender to the fact that it's gonna be perfectly imperfect. Mm-hmm. So actually the day that it was coming out, it was so exciting. And the day I had it in my hands, so exciting, yet at the same time, really scary, because all of these people were going to see the inner workings, on pages. But yeah.
Cool. That's amazing. I love that. Hey yogis, I just wanted to take a quick little break to talk about studio growth. Has your yoga studio's growth become stagnant? If you're like many studio owners I talk to, you've tried every marketing tactic under the sun. You started a blog, you're posting regularly on all the social media sites, running challenges, sending out newsletters, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, you're doing a ton of work and barely paying the bills. What if there was an easier way? A way to get new students regularly coming through the door without having to do so much work to get them there. A proven system that will consistently bring in 20 plus new paying students to your studio each and every month. Well, there is. Ron Medlin and his team at GetYogaStudents.com have developed a 3-step system that will help you quickly grow your yoga studio to a 6-figure profits and beyond without being shackled to your business. So if you're ready to grow fast and you'd like the blueprint to help you get started, visit GetYogaStudents.com today to get the exact system Ron and his team uses to help his yoga studio clients add 10, 20, or even 30 new students every single month. On top of that, you get a free 45-minute consultation session. So if you're kind of like, I'm not really too sure about all this, I don't want to fork out a bunch of money without even knowing wondering if this is going to work, head on over to getyogastudents.com, book a free consultation, and just talk with Ron. He's got so much knowledge, and him and his team are willing to work with you with your studio's needs. And once again, it's getmoreyogastudents.com to start getting more students in your yoga studio today. This episode is also brought to you in part by Punch Pass. You heard me talk about Punch Pass at the beginning of this episode, and I am so excited to be partnered with them. Before we continue with the episode, I wanted to tell you a couple more things about the software. So with Punch Pass, they have really done their best to make sure that you can focus on the business that you enjoy and let them take the hassle off your hands. And they've done so in a way that we can afford as businesses. One of the things that I love the most about Punch Pass is that they're a small business, just like you and just like me. And so they're made for us. They're not a big company that's just charging us a lot of money for the services. They understand that we're small businesses as yoga teachers, and they really want us to be able to do what we love, which is teach yoga. So if you've been looking for some sort of software that can make your yoga business a lot more simple, head on over to punchpass.com/MBOM to start your free trial today. All right, back to the episode. And so, kind of going back to your business, I mean, you've got studios, you've got a book, and then you're also running trainings and retreats. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Can
you tell me more about that side of your business?
Yeah. So I guess because I've done some different things to have connections with different people from all over the country. I guess when I worked with Baptiste, and then I did a little work in collaboration with some other teachers before I started my own yoga teacher training. And I just had a lot of exposure to people from all over. And so what we were finding was happening when we started, of course, we started our trainings in the beginning just because we had an organic need at Yoga Project. We needed teachers. And so what we were finding after a while is that we had people fly in to come to our trainings. And so people were coming and staying in Texas, not a destination location, in my mind, to do these trainings. And so we thought, that's really interesting. And we have this audience of people coming in from other places. So we just had the desire to go somewhere else and see different places in the world. And so we saw it as a perfect opportunity to have these international retreats. And so I believe our first I've done a little bit in Mexico, but we went in Costa Rica was kind of our initial place where we did retreats there. I mean, we've been doing them in Costa Rica. We're going back in December for, I think, the 8th time to do a program there. Little by little, we started branching out just because we had a desire to go to different places. And so we've been to Bali and Thailand to run programs as well. But
nice.
Yeah.
And so I think that, running an international retreat is very much like, I'm sure there's a lot of yoga teachers listening who are like, wow, that sounds like the dream. Like you have your own studio, you've got a book, you're running all these amazing retreats, which yes, amazing. But I think that there's always like the business side of things, like the more challenging side of things. Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, like the business side of running retreats in your experience?
Yeah, well, I'll say for the teachers who, because I had someone say to me recently, like, I wish I had your life. I'm like, oh yeah, my life is really amazing. But I always feel like I need to say, but I work my ass off. Like we work really, really hard. And the thing with owning your own business and writing a book and running retreats, it's not an 8 to 5. And it's not like you walk away and it's done. I mean, there's always the possibility, the potential for more work in every hour of the day. So that's what I always feel like I have to say right away when someone says that to me. But the challenges are, one, that it just is always ongoing. And then I think with running retreats, it's really challenging in any field, in any career, to not get really personally attached to the results and the outcome, and to not allow yourself to be a beginner at what you're doing. We've had a slow build. It takes time. I think that the reason that we were able to do these programs is that we had to do the groundwork. We had to put our time in to be exposed and to meet enough people to where we could have a big enough pool to draw from to have people come to the trainings and retreat. So I would, say for people who are trying to begin it, to get into that, there's so many details as far as finding the location that will work with you, as far as it not being too financially risky. It's all going to be financially risky, but finding locations that, it's soft enough that they can make it work for their model of how much money they can spend and things like that. And then giving it time and, being patient about how many people are showing up and things like that. Because it just like anything else, it doesn't happen magically. And it's not like you can just have a huge social media presence and all of a sudden it's there. It really takes the time to do the groundwork and to put your time in to make it successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think this idea of like launching anything and having it fill immediately is something that's kind of like put out there by people who maybe do have that then the rest of us are like, oh, that'll be the case. Like, for example, when I released my first online course, I was like, okay, now where are the people? And I was like, oh, right.
Exactly.
I need to find those people.
And just because they don't show up the first day it's released, right? It's like, and my husband is such a good balance for me and always teaching me this lesson and reminding me. He's like energetically opposite for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's like, it's okay. It takes time. But they may not show up right when it's released, but they give it some time, and maybe 6 months down the road or a year down the road, it may happen. Mm-hmm. But you just have to keep plugging away.
Yeah.
And keep doing what you love and keep learning and building your competency. And then eventually things start to fall into place, as they should.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any tips on kind of making a retreat stand out? Because I feel like there's like a lot of people doing retreats now. And I mean, I've looked around at all the ones out there and it's like, well, how does somebody choose the one that you're doing over everything else that's out there?
I think that you're like, if people, well, they have to be able to kind of get a feel for who you are from your web presence. So on your website, making sure that there's an actual picture of the leader, like whoever's leading the retreat. So the teacher of the retreat, maybe even a video is helpful. So I think that people really value knowing what they're showing up for. And part of that is who's going to be teaching me, who's the teacher. And then I think too, what I see a lot of is just, it might be a random yoga wellness retreat. Well, there's so many of those out there that I would say find your niche and specialize and be really clear in your marketing about what you're offering. Because I think the more people know exactly what you're offering, the more willing they're going to be to come. And you want those people who don't know you well to becoming not just those that know you well. And the more clear and transparent you are in your marketing, I think the more effective it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good reminder, is like kind of offering something, like creating a theme for it, something that's going to make it unique, something that's going to draw people in. Because if it's like just another yoga retreat, then that doesn't really make somebody necessarily want to come to yours. I mean, date, price, location might definitely be a factor with that, but something that's going to actually entice people to want to come in and to pay for it.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. That's amazing. I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about this, but can you tell me some of the biggest business lessons that you've learned through your yoga career just over the years?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that comes to me, because I think that it can often be the most challenging aspect of a business, is the relationships, like managing people. And like I mentioned earlier, we have 30 people on staff, and boy, I just had, it was such a progress for me, a progressive journey for me to be the only teacher, studio owner, to now, having 30 teachers on staff. And so one of the biggest lessons for me has just been learning leadership skills and learning how to support others and to make others great, and to kind of step back and let those teachers, the other teachers that are working with me, shine. And really learning effective communication. I know in the beginning, 5 to 7 years of studio ownership, I just didn't know. I'd never really been introduced to the idea of effective communication, and I was very reactive and didn't know how to manage my own emotions when it came to dealing with things. So a problem might occur and I didn't know how to pause and what I call sift to the facts of what happened. And that's actually, I developed this sort of teaching model that I teach in my mindfulness programs and our teacher trainings, and even our staff. We talk about sifting. And so when something happens, we pause, we might journal about it and just get to the actual facts of what happened and learn how to decipher and kind of see through all of the non-reality things, dramatic things that we attach to circumstances that get in the way of effective communication, that get in the way of relationship. And so that idea of sifting when something happens and giving it space and being able to be clear with those that I'm working with has been one of the, and boy, the more that has developed in, I'll say in myself and my husband in working with our staff, the more we've seen our business blossom. It's like we have this really authentic connection with our staff. We're really straightforward and honest. And we always say we're a drama-free zone. If when we hire staff, we really take into consideration, do they fit into our drama-free zone? Because we've really worked hard to create that. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge piece. I would say that's the number one thing.
Yeah. I have a question about that. Because I feel like interviewing is like, I feel like it's like a broken model, yet I also don't know the way to fix it because it seems like it's like the best way to do it. But how do you know if somebody's like a good fit or if they're going to fit into the drama-free zone?
I think, and it sounds sort of fluffy, I guess, but like intuition is everything. And just, having some real conversations and, usually by the time that we hire someone, for most cases, we've had a long interview process because they've attended our teacher training. Mostly, not 100% of the time, but mostly they've attended training with us. We also go on to do what's our mentorship program. So after we wouldn't have someone graduate and then throw them right into teaching. We give them a mentorship program where it's another 6 weeks of working with them. And we tell them this is an interview process for us and for you. We want to make sure it's a good fit for you and a good fit for us. So that's one way. I mean, we just get to know each other and we see how things fit. We see, just integrity around commitments and things like that. But I would say beyond all of that, it's just that gut knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's trusting that too.
Yeah, because there's so many times in business and then as a mother, we can all look back and say, I knew that. Like I knew that in my gut. I knew, and I didn't listen and I made the decision anyway. And then the older I get, the more I see, oh my gosh, that gut knowing is just intelligence, magnified by 1,000. Like that is our innate intelligence. So it really comes down to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been on the side of hiring a couple of times and I can think of a situation where like my gut was somebody different than what the manager ended up. She had like the final say over it, but she was like, oh, are you happy with this person? And I'm just like, if I could go back in time, I would have fought for the other person knowing what I know now. But it's like, it's tough when you're looking at a piece of paper and then you're meeting somebody in this really like enclosed situation and it's kind of hard. It's like, is my brain right or is my heart right or are they both wrong? Like, I don't really know.
So. It is so true. Yeah. Wow. And that is such a journey to study and that self-learning. And I would say to go we even went as far as the studio model. Like we decided we're not hiring just from experience. We're not hiring just because someone has, 15 years of teaching or they've done this training, or even their skill level at this point. We feel like in our community and our staff of teachers that teachers learn by osmosis and it takes time to grow and to develop anyway. And we see that always comes along. So we don't, even if they are lacking some skill or experience, but we can feel the integrity of that person, we will hire them because we're not as concerned about the skill as we are the integrity of the person.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's great. Great tips for hiring because it's hard. It's really tough, but I love all of that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Did you have any other business tips that you've learned throughout your career?
One thing, that I've learned, I've been thinking about a lot lately is just this idea, especially in the social media world. Gosh, it's so enticing and to get in so wrapped up in how big is my social presence. And I think that's important. 100%. Yes. Social presence. I don't know that you can run a business. I'm sure there are some circumstances where you can, but I don't know that you could successfully run hardly any businesses these days without having a social presence. And we all kind of get that. But I think what I'm seeing is that, and I've even fallen into the trap myself at times, is there's this urge to like build social presence more than the urge to build competency. And so I've really seen lately that I don't have to be so addicted to, being someone as a social presence, or as far as being bigger and better and doing more, and that it's more important for us to continue building our competency, to continue learning, and to work on really getting legs under what it is that we're teaching, that we're offering, that we're sharing, and just, continuing to cultivate and nourish that and the one-on-one relationships versus getting so caught up in social branding.
Right. Yeah. I think that's an important one to remember with this like kind of idea that's going around where like you have to be on social media all the time and promoting all your things and talking about your stuff and being super vulnerable. It's like, being a human in person is also really important as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think too, especially as a teacher, like you need to show up for your students.
Yeah. 100%.
Amazing.
And I guess the other thing with business, really is just you just got to keep plugging away. There will be days when it's not booming and growing, and class sizes are smaller, but I do really believe in my heart, if you just keep plugging it away at what your gifts are and how you can best share those gifts with the people who are coming in to receive them, then I think there's no way. I would say no way, but there's hardly any way to go wrong with that.
Right.
You just got to keep plugging away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things that has definitely been like a motto in my business. Like there was a big point of time where I was like, I don't really know where I'm going with this. So I just was like, just do one thing a day. Just do one thing a day that's kind of moving you in the direction that you want to go, and things will slowly start to take shape in terms of what you're actually creating. And it worked for me. Like it was, I don't know, hard and frustrating. And there was lots of times where I was like, I don't want to do anything on this, but I'd be like, just send an email, answer an email,
yes,
interact on Facebook a little.
And you sound like me. And like I make this huge deal out of this little thing. Like I make this huge circumstance around this one little thing that has to be done. I'm like, just do the thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm not like a huge procrastinator, but because I don't procrastinate all the time, I really notice when I am doing it. And it's like, then I can see the mental patterns of how big of a thing I've created in my head. And then it's always like, I sit down to do something, and every single time it's like, oh, that wasn't that hard.
It only took 37 seconds.
Yeah. Actually, like sometimes it really is that easy. And it's like, I've been putting it off for hours. I've been fighting with myself, and I'm just like, oh, what are you doing, Amanda? And then, that lesson stays in my head for a little while. And then sure enough, it happens again, and I have to sit myself down and do the thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, not so hard.
Because it tells us, right, that we're more like, maybe we're more fearful of the outcome of that action or something around it. It's not the actual thing. It's like there's some mental block with the outcome of that thing, or I don't know. For me, it's always that way. It's like I have some other fear around it. It's not the actual task. It's like something bigger.
Yeah, like if you're sending an email for something, you're afraid of like what the answer is going to be or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like pitching yourself to a new studio, like a fear of maybe them not wanting you or something like that.
Right.
Or a fear of them saying yes too.
Exactly. Yes. Both directions.
Amazing. Were there any other business lessons you wanted to bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay. So there's lots of new yoga teachers listening to the podcast. If you could give new yoga teachers out there one tip, what would that tip be?
I would say let yourself be a beginner. And not only let yourself be a beginner, love being a beginner, because it's such a magical place to be. And I always tell new teachers, you have so much to offer right now. I see new teachers getting caught up in, I need to become an expert in this, I need to learn this, I need to get fancier sequences and all of these needs. But I love the freshness of a brand new teacher. And like I said, even in our hiring, like there's some brand new teachers have a lot to offer. And so if they can just stand in front of their classes with the knowing that they already have a lot to offer, then that can be really powerful in the way they end up connecting and being with their classes and what they have to share and how they can be helpful. Really blossoms. And then from there, keep learning. And as far as what you learn, what are you thinking about a lot? What excites you? What is it? Is it anatomy? Is it philosophy? Is it, whatever it is there some sort of psychological aspect? Whatever you are excited about, keep studying, and whether it's a book or a blog or whatever, just keep studying, because that's the direction, the path that you're meant to take. And it takes all kinds. You don't have to teach like anyone else teaches, and you don't have to, hold the same methodologies and philosophies as other, because it really takes all kinds and all types of teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Remembering that there's like room for everyone. And then I love that tip about, remembering that you have something to offer as a new teacher. I think that entering into the studio space and can be really intimidating when you're new, because you are like a quote unquote yoga teacher, but you don't necessarily identify as a yoga teacher yet because you haven't started teaching. And then it can be really scary if like the studio has a bunch of people who have been teaching for like 10, 15, 20 years. And you're like, who am I to teach here? And I think it is important to remember that like you deserve to get paid. You deserve to have a job. You're good enough for all of that. And you have something unique to say and to offer.
And that they've been preparing. I always say you've been preparing for this moment your whole life. Like I know you're a brand new teacher, but it's all of your life experience, your whole journey of your own personal yoga practice on top of your training. And when we get too caught up in not being good enough and not knowing enough, that's the very thing that blocks what people really want, which is just connection and authenticity.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of the reasons that I really like hearing people's yoga stories is for that. Like, I think it's really cool to see how everyone ends up in the same career path, but doing really different, unique things and kind of how they got there. I find that aspect of it really fascinating, because it's like we're all drawn to the same practice, maybe different aspects of it, but everyone came from somewhere different.
Right.
Amazing. So if people want to, check out one of your studios, take a class, maybe attend a training, a workshop, a retreat, buy your book, where can they go to find you?
So my website is Stacy Dockins, StacyDockins.com. And all of that stuff is on there. My book is on Amazon, and it's there in paperback and Kindle, and it's called Embodied Posture, Your Unique Body and Yoga.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Stacy. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Stacy Dockins. Make sure you go check out everything that she's up to over at stacydockins.com. I've also got links on the show notes to her website as well as to Yoga Project Studios if you're in that area or going to be traveling through. I am also really lucky to have been able to take a look at Stacy's book, to have a copy of it, and it's really, really great. So if you've been looking for a good book that's kind of framing anatomy from the perspective of looking at the poses and the postures in yoga from the perspective of us all having unique bodies, I think it's definitely a good fit for you. But as always, you can find everything from this episode on the show notes at www.mbomyoga.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And as always, you can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. Just search that in the Facebook bar, answer the questions, and I'll let you on in. We've been having some really fun discussions lately, so would love for you to join us if you want to meet some more people and just learn more about yoga business and talk about it in a supportive environment. All right, that's all for me today. As always, thank you so much for listening and for being a part of the MBOM community, and I will see you next week. Namaste.